Resonating Reflections and Assalamu Alaikum with me, Fatima Jabbie, on Ramadan Radio 87.9 FM. We're also online at ramadanradio.org and streaming on Facebook. And today we have our guest, Shahista Zamer. So we're going to hear a lot about her experience as a senior leader today, and climbing the challenges of, being in the whole COVID situation in her field. Please do call, text, or WhatsApp with your feedback, questions, and comments on 077 614 60614. That's 077 614 60614. So actually, Shahista, we go way back to, well, I don't want to give away our ages, but we go back way to university, and I actually met Shahista on a personal enhancement program, and she was one of the trainers, so I was really lucky to have had her training me, and the whole aim of that program was how to become a leader in your profession. So Shahista Zamer, she's also a mother of two, so she's like basically superhero woman here. So mashallah, and she now works as a senior leader in an all-through primary school, and so I'll hand it over to you, Shahista, to tell us a bit more about yourself. Yes, go ahead.
Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Binta. That was really kind of you. I'm not sure about the superhero part, but I can certainly talk about my experiences and a little bit more about myself, especially my role as a teacher, progressing through the different levels in a primary school and moving into senior leadership where I am now. So I'm a mother of two. I've got two teenagers, a boy and a girl. I've been in education for over 8 years now.
Wow. And I know, time has flown. I didn't realize it's been that long,
Absolutely. It's really flown, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. And the kids as well. Like they're still in they're in secondary school now, aren't they?
Secondary school now. Yeah. So my daughter's now in year 9 and my son is in year 10.
Mashallah, you're juggling a lot.
Absolutely. I studied law many years ago at Warwick University, and then took some time out, had my children, and then I had some health issues. So once I'd recovered, finished treatment, it was a case of renewing my intention to be a committed mother, but also to serve my community and doing what I wanted to do for many years. So that was education.
Okay, so by default. And actually, would you say law and education, they do go hand in hand, because you're dealing with people, and it's almost sort of you have to be a sort of a performer, I guess, as you know, when you deal with the courts or legal proceedings, but you're always faced with people. So would you think like the passion from law complements it quite nicely? The skills are transferable.
Oh, absolutely. As Glanville Williams said, law is the concrete of society. So we as humans, we can't function without the law around us, and that actually definitely complements the work I do in my role today. So in my role as a senior leader, I'm also a designated safeguarding lead, and in fact, family law has paid off, because there are quite a bit that I was aware of before I'd even had my training, and it really helps when dealing with day-to-day cases with pupils, staff, and also where it comes to disciplinary proceedings. It's quite good to be aware of different legislation and just the practices that we have in place, and just having that respect for rules and regulations, because all our work is really dependent on that.
Okay, excellent. So what would you like to explain to us, what is an all-through primary school?
Oh, right. Okay. So where I work right now, it's an all-through school. It's a school that serves not just primary pupils, but also secondary and sixth formers. So we're all on one site.
Oh, right across the board then.
Absolutely.
I went to a girls' school, and I was stuck in that girls' school until I reached sixth form, because it was exactly like that. The only thing, we didn't have a primary school like yours. But yes, please do go on.
So it's one of a kind, and in fact there are increasing amount of schools across Birmingham.
Right.
That are all throughs now, or they might start off as a secondary and then expand to a primary. So I'm fortunate that I'm serving as a senior leader, so equivalent to an assistant head, I'd say right now,
Amazing.
in the primary phase.
MashaAllah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, as your journey from a teacher facing the whole classroom, and dealing with these, kids, because kids come with their own challenges. Actually, you're probably quite lucky that you opted for the primary end as opposed to the teenagers, which would probably drive you crazy, as you know, you're a mom. So how have you found that transition from being a teacher that was teaching children to being a leader, a senior leader? Can you talk us through that journey?
Absolutely. Being a parent has actually helped me be a better teacher. Years ago, when I did plan to do my teacher training, I wasn't a parent then, or a mother, in fact. And it was different because I actually have developed, I'd say, greater empathy and a better understanding of the challenges that children face, and as they especially transition into teenage years. And in fact, I feel that sometimes my temperament is suitable for possibly secondary children, but also, but particularly for upper key stage 2, so children who are in years 5 to 6. I worked with them for the most recent couple of years, and now I'm teaching in year 2 in the mornings, whilst I do my leadership role outside of my teaching hours.
Okay. So, your day will start from, your day starts from what, like 9? No, maybe you probably have to get in way earlier than that.
I think that's a misconception. People think that as a teacher that you'd roll into work at 9 o'clock and leave at 3:30 when the children go home. Not at all. As an example, whether I'm a teacher or even a senior leader, I was at work today, which is still the Easter holiday in where at my school, and so it has involved me going into work during that time, and going to work during that time to prepare myself. And teachers usually would come in about 7:30 to 8 o'clock at the latest. They'll set up their classroom. There's normally morning briefings. In our setting, there's a morning briefing in the morning before the teaching day starts, then the gate opens. And at that point, if I was a teacher, I'd be in the class at 8:30 with the task on the board for pupils to enter, hand in their homework in a tray, take their bags and coats off, and literally just get on with the task up until registration.
Right.
And myself, I'm usually at the gate. After briefing, it's a case of just checking staff members that everyone's all right and everyone's got everything.
Can I just interject there? Because I'd love to hear that experience, your day-to-day. We'll touch on that a bit more later. Okay. But what I really want to sort of grasp, and make the audience understand is how as a Muslim woman, mashallah, like climbing from, a teacher to leadership, what challenges have you faced, and how did you personally overcome those?
There are different challenges. It depends on the setting and the school and the culture of the school. In one school that I've worked in, I've had the opportunity of working in different schools, which has been a blessing, and it's also been a learning curve for me. So in one setting, there were a lot of staff from the same kind of background, so it was easy in one way to feel understood and respected, especially when it came to the month of Ramadan and fasting. In one setting, for example, they weren't aware of how to go about things. If I needed to pray, they didn't know, and they were just over accommodating. It was quite sweet.
Oh, wow.
So it was nice, and it was an opportunity for that dialogue to be had and just talk about how we have different ways of worshipping and remembering our Maker, and also understanding the hijab, because it's also kind of dispelling those kind of misconceptions that you wear your hijab to the shower, and you go to sleep wearing your hijab.
Really?
Yes, just like how our pupils think that we stay in school at nighttime. It's a bit like, I find with the non-Muslim community that they're just eager to know, but they're not sure how to go about it. And I think that conversation has been, had over the last couple of years, and it's really helped. But when I first went into teaching, it was a case of, um, you know, why do you wear hijab? Like, do you have to wear it, or could you take it off once you're in school? Or, there used to be those misconceptions, but alhamdulillah, it was an opportunity to kind of be a good role model, I hope, to the children that in the community I serve, which is inner city, and also and to support that conversation, and just address any misconceptions.
Yes, and I think, maybe your field is much more accommodating, because I was thinking about a comparison to, for example, the banking sector, or the corporate world, let's say, and we know that there are challenges of wearing the hijab and sort of applying for positions to increase, whether you want to increase your wages, whether you just want that fulfillment of being in a higher position. And would you say it's a fair point that actually some Muslim women may feel that if they did take their hijab off, it will be easier to climb this ladder?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think. And
what advice, sorry, would you give to those young people?
I would say that yes, sometimes looking the part does help. Wearing a hijab or having a beard, or being visibly a Muslim, or just so that where it manifests on the outside. I think it's actually a strength, and I think it will be something that empowers you. And over time, as you develop as an adult, into like as you mature, you become more confident in holding yourself, and also being proud of the fact that you are who you are, whether it's Muslim or non-Muslim, etc. So I think it's really important that we keep our identity. And I know for me, myself personally, wearing hijab has been so important. I've been wearing it since the age of 12. Yes, it does mean that it limits me in a certain profession. If I wanted to pursue law when I graduated a long time ago, and it was a case where every single social was in a pub or in a bar. There was no concept of let's have coffee instead, or can we think about a different venue? And also it was a case of, well, do you want to have a glass of Coke instead of and that was the compromise. Well, come to the bar, but you can have a glass of Coke, or you can have some, like you can have a like kind of carbonated drink, but that wasn't who I was, and that didn't fit with me. So I knew definitely that pursuing the legal profession as someone who wears hijab and someone who does want to have children, early in my, as a married woman, I didn't want that career for myself. And it's a shame, because I know I would have possibly enjoyed it.
You would have been a great lawyer.
Thank you. Right back at you. So no, thank you. But wearing the hijab in a school, and as I progressed through my career, yes, I think you can look the part, you can wear a blazer, you can look the part and look smart, but it's also about being able to explain or just talk about yourself without apologizing for who you are. And I think that in itself is a strength, and that's something that can help us move forward as an ummah, definitely.
I totally agree with that. And it's inspiring to meet role models like yourself, because I do think there isn't enough of that, showing up to young people. And perhaps you could even think about mentoring people who are facing challenges in the school when they're thinking of career paths, and sort of sharing your experiences. And I think it's also important to highlight from an Islamic point of view that being the best that you can be, whatever position that you find yourself in, is what being a Muslim is, that you perform to your utmost best. And yeah, would you like to add?
Yeah, I would like to add something. I just remembered, going back to the point you raised earlier, when I was, how we met on that personal enhancement program, there was a sister I met, and I was in awe of her. And she was a very practicing sister, mashallah. And I remember her not compromising where it came to certain things. And, she needs to pray, she'll stop everything and she'll just say, I have to pray and I'll come back. And in fact, I took inspiration from her. And it was actually a few years later, well, a good few years later, when I saw that, she was on LinkedIn, and I thought, oh, great, because we lost contact, and I reached out to her. I didn't notice she didn't wear a hijab at that point, and I know everyone has their own kind of situation and circumstances. And for me personally, I took a lot of strength in when she wore hijab, because I thought for me that was the role model I very much needed. And I just thought, oh, I hope everything's okay, because clearly, like how she wanted to carry herself and her dress, everything, it seemed different. So I just thought, may Allah make it easier for her. But at the same time, she's doing what she has to do. But maybe that's, the perception needed for banking. I don't know.
Social pressures maybe as well. I think that is a massive challenge. But as you say, being comfortable in your own skin is what, to be honest, even I have found that where, I've walked into a room and maybe I get the surprise look because my first name is actually Beatrice, as you know, so it doesn't really match the image. But believe it or not, people just want you to be able to relate on a human level. And once that fear goes, or whatever apprehension they had before, you're pretty much another human being. And as long as you get the job done, that's all they care about, and being authentic, I think, is the key, really. So, I'd like to, if you were to advise people in hindsight now, young people who are thinking of going into your field, what advice would you give them that you didn't receive, maybe knowing everything that you have gone through now?
I think the biggest piece of advice I'd give is ask for support if you need it. So I entered teaching as a mother of 2 young children. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it was a case of, burning on both ends. So it's about having that conversation, whether, adjustments can be made to working hours or even training hours, or could, and most employers are really, really happy to support you. I know I've had really accommodating head teachers where I've had a conversation after, that hesitation at the beginning, where they've said, it's fine for you to take your child to his appointment, just give us the appointment letter, so we know what time to kind of have your class covered. So I think that's one, which is speak up and not worry about things so much. Another one is it's really important to be ever so organized. So sometimes if, let's say we weren't in lockdown, or, we didn't have any restrictions on comings and going of people, it's sometimes okay to say no. So if someone wants to come over, you've got an auntie or an uncle or a relative or friend, who really, just wants to have a bit of a chat with you, or just, chill out or whatever. It's fine to say, look, I've got work going on. I've got to get this done first, but can we meet later? So sometimes it's those social pressures, when you think you have to be doing everything. Well, no, you have to
pleasing everyone.
Absolutely. Just think about the needs of your family and think about what needs to be done, because after all, that job does pay the bills. So, and if you want it to be taken seriously, then, the quality of your work speaks volumes.
Yeah, definitely. So I would like to now move on to talking about your current circumstance. And you have different roles. So you wear the hats of a mother. You also wear the hat of a teacher, because I think you still do teaching. And you have the senior leadership role. So talk us through each, I guess, how you found that during this lockdown, and what's that been like?
It's been a roller coaster, and I think that would be fair to say for anyone who's experienced lockdown as we have. So in terms of me as a mother during lockdown, it has been tricky, I won't lie. Initially, as a key worker, I kept my children at home with me, even though I had the opportunity to send them into school so I could focus on my work. So last March, when lockdown was announced, I had my children at home with me, and right towards the end, I did find it a bit tricky, because I was, busy with my laptop in my, in the living room where I'd set up my area, and my children were in their rooms doing their homework. But sometimes it's so hard, because it's that feeling of guilt, because
you've sent them away.
You've had time with them, and it was a case of getting them out of the house to take part in, some cycling, some walking for their well-being, because it's such a dramatic change for us, and one that we couldn't have expected.
No.
So it was that constant feeling of guilt that shadowed everything, because it was really hard to find boundaries for myself as a mother, where my work life kind of really took over my life in the home. And sometimes it's easy just to get up, drive to work, come back home at the end of the day, make dinner, etc. But during lockdown, when I was working from home, there were stages where I'd start in the morning at 8 o'clock, and then sometimes I'd finish at 6, which is a normal day for me, and then it'll be 7, and then it'll actually
that's long hours.
Yeah, they are. I mean,
people think teaching is a piece of cake, really, in terms of the hours, but clearly it's not, because you take that work home with you.
Yeah, well, with teaching, it's also involves assessing pupils, monitoring their progress, feeding back to parents. You'll also have complaints along the way, which I can talk about later. But it's just, there's so much to the eye, and ultimately, it's always about the data. Of course, it's about our pupils. Our pupils are the heart of everything, but it's about how children perform, because our school is measured on the performance of children ultimately.
Right. And would you say that's a pressure on the children as well? Oh, by the way, I wondered how did you convince your children to still be engaged, even though they're doing schoolwork at home? But how did you maintain their engagement? I be able to do that in a home environment.
Well, it was a case of it was tricky. First, we did draw up a timetable. They had one from school, and it was a case of trying to factor in the activities they could do, and then think about what rewards there'll be. So
you had incentives.
Incentives, absolutely. And whether I'm a teacher or mother, it's the same kind of thing. Or even just as an individual, we want them to do a certain amount of work so that they can then just relax and take part in something. Sometimes the incentive was baking, or it will be a case of just watching something on TV together as a family, or just like a board game. But as they've progressed into teenage years, and they're not so much interested in sitting together as a family. They just want to be on their phone ultimately. That was a challenge in itself. So keeping them engaged was difficult on certain days, and as the weeks grew, went on, and the novelty kind of wore off that they were at home. It got difficult. So then I did speak to their school, and because I had a friend who's a GP who's sending her children into school, the same school. So I thought, well, why don't I just do that as well? And by sending them to school, it meant that there was a structure in place, and that really helped me personally. And I know it helped them, because they were able to reconnect with some pupils that were in school who are their friends, and also allowed them to just find, have a routine going.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's a big switch for them. I had my nephew actually, and he was even doing schoolwork at the weekends. So the school actually scheduled classes at the weekends. So the mother then had to complain, because she said, it's too much, she's handling her full-time job and having to also not have a breather over the weekend, which was quite surprising to learn. But yeah, it's a lot to juggle. So your role as a teacher, how have you found that?
It's been tricky on some occasions. I normally would be teaching a group in the morning, and as an extra group. And during lockdown, I wasn't teaching so much as supporting teachers in preparing resource packs for those children who couldn't access remote learning provision. And so what we did is our staff were asked to record, voice over the PowerPoint presentations of the teaching slides, so that children can listen to the teachers' voices and still be able to submit their work through Teams or Purple Mash in our setting. And for myself, I know that behind the scenes, there was a lot of, dealing with parents, supporting because of free school meal vouchers being issued. And there was a bit of some confusion with parents, mainly because I think when the Department for Education announced in mid-January that they will carry on, like in the most recent lockdown, that they'll carry on giving free school meal vouchers. There was a lot of, with parents, especially those who couldn't access, who don't understand English very well, or just can't, they didn't understand how it worked. So it was a case
how does it work, out of interest?
So there was a company that the government provided funding to, and they would issue a £15 voucher per child who's entitled to a free school meal. And that voucher would be sent through email to the parents. But from last March, we had to collect all the email addresses up and make sure that parents were able to get that email. So, or get a hard copy of the voucher. So then they can go to the supermarket and redeem it against their purchases, which worked really well. And it was the major retailers, so even like Aldi, Asda, etc. So yeah, parents had the opportunity to, and it wasn't just about spending on food. They could buy essentials. So if Asda was selling, let's say, a table, they could use their vouchers to purchase that item. Obviously, we'd say it's for food, but really, it's up to the individual parent to decide how to spend those vouchers. So, you know, as a school, there was so much we were doing to support the community. We had a case where we've got a child whose parent is very unwell. And it was a case of just, you know, delivering school meals. So at lunchtime for the key workers that were in, we'd prepare boxes of food, you know, for the children. So they had a hot lunch in school, but also boxes of food were prepared for children offsite who requested one or their families did. So it meant that at least they were getting one hot meal delivered to their doorstep. And that's something that we did as a school. Another thing we did, and what I was personally involved with, is supporting a mother with 6 children in the school whose washing machine broke down.
So in the same school, all the kids were?
School. Yeah, so this is during lockdown. So it's a case of, you know, getting them in touch. So initially some might request a food parcel through the website of, you know, of the local authority. And then there are also community care grants, which means that once a year they can apply for funding up to the value of £300 if it's an unexpected, you know, item. And
substantial amount.
Yeah, so it's a substantial amount, but it's up to 300. And also, I'm the one as a DSL, as a designated safeguarding lead, who's filling in the paperwork, who actually puts forward the case and submits it to the local, you know, to the registered charity who work in conjunction with the local authority to make sure that the family, you know, like all the details are, you know, submitted, talking about how much will benefit this family, and finding suitable products, whether it's, you know, like a retail, like Argos or whatever, and just kind of making the suggestions. So it was very rewarding because later on when school did open again, the mum did approach me and say, thank you, you know, really helped. And it's nice to know that as a school, we've been able to support families.
That's a really great example, you know, of good practice that your school is pioneering. So just to clarify for the audience's information, so the DSL is the person to approach for parents who are facing these types of difficulty, and they can put the case forward for the parent to be able to receive funding potentially.
Yes, as a designated safeguarding lead, primarily our job is to, our job is to safeguard pupils. So if there was a child who'd hurt themselves, or if there's any concerns
in the home,
or even if a child's been absent, has gone abroad for a holiday and hasn't returned, then that's something that we as a safeguarding lead, we would investigate, look into, have conversations. But also where it came to the community care grants, for instance, that was also in a role to, you know, support our families and the pastoral needs, because ultimately by ensuring that that family had a washing machine, it meant that the children had that, you know, that finances that the mum would have spent on a washing machine could be spent on something that's even more important in that household in particular. You know, and this is quite common where parents don't actually have beds for their children or even sofas. So it was a case of, you know, I did submit a request for about £900 of funding and only one was given, but still it made a difference. There was another family where a cooker was needed. So it's a case of, you know, it really does benefit the families. And as a DSL, that was just one of the things that I had to deal with during lockdown. And
this is also part of your senior leadership role, I'm assuming. So you're not... Yeah, go ahead.
There's one of my colleagues isn't a senior leader, but she's a DSL. So anyone in the school can be trained up as a DSL, which is a 2-day course. Right. And it does cost, like a great amount. So a school has to think carefully about the resources and think about, is that good use of money? So our pastoral lead in school is also a DSL, as is the head teacher, for instance, and it allows them to also support families and support the leadership team as a whole. So if there's a case that needed support, dealing with, and we could ask her to get involved.
Okay, so this, Amy, your role is very varied. I don't know how you fit it all in, Shahista. So in terms of being a senior leader, what's your day-to-day like in that role, and what challenges have you faced personally in your day-to-day role? How have you overcome those?
Some really good questions there. I think with as a senior leader, what my day normally looks like is attend briefings, keep it just like how we would keep an eye on our children. We'd also keep an eye on our colleagues around us, making sure they're supported, that they're in the right place at the right time as well. So when the doors open in the classrooms, that the teachers are available, that they're able to support our children. There's a task available, and it also means that making sure the resources are available to staff, that we're monitoring what's going on, what does teaching and learning look like in the classroom. And also it means teaching alongside teachers to serve as an example, so not do as I say, but also do as I do as well. So setting a good example to others. So I will teach and I will mark books alongside teachers. So I'll have a group of my own in the morning for a couple of hours. I will also then go straight on to lunchtime duty. So for 30 minutes, I'll be there.
Oh, I remember the teachers in the playground. So you're now doing that.
Absolutely. So for me, it's a case of just walking around supporting lunchtime supervisors, but really just making sure our children are making the right choices, that they're safe and that they're in the right place at the right time. And after lunch, and just making sure that those certain children who don't eat as much or like to eat their pudding before their main course, they're just kind of like steering them or just keeping an eye on certain children. It's all part and parcel of our duties. And then after lunch duty, it'll involve me teaching phonics to another group, and then there'll be an online Teams assembly. So during lockdown, and even like whilst there's that ever dangerous threat of COVID or coronavirus, we still have our assemblies through Teams. So it's a case of delivering assemblies.
All the students and
absolutely
the whole exact same setup as you would in school.
So we've got cameras in class, so they're used as visualizers to kind of project the work that children are completing onto the interactive whiteboard. So it involves us, so those can be doubled up as cameras as well. So it's just literally showing the class. So I'd carry on leading assemblies. There'll be the values assembly at the beginning of the week. At the end of the week, there will be a reward assembly. And it just means that children can still feel celebrated and have their work acknowledged as well at the end of the week. And it also gives us the opportunity to talk about values and talk about what's going on in the wider world, which really helps the children, I think, and share those key messages.
Yes, I think they're just so exposed earlier on compared to our days, and probably they don't know how to make sense of it all. So
absolutely. And then and with so much social media, it's a case of being able to support children rationalizing what's out there. We in my role in the afternoon, it's kind of taken up with a lot of monitoring of books, having pupil progress meetings with staff, also performance management meetings, so setting targets, following up on them, supporting staff. Often it will involve me doing this in the morning before teaching hours or after school, after the school day ends. So a lot, so it's a case of dealing with if children want to go home early for an appointment or something, it's a case of just looking into it and thinking, is there another time that they can have the appointment, or is there a hospital appointment? So it's just like sometimes ensuring letters go out, the school improvement plan is updated, that we're dealing with. Sometimes we're involved with submitting data for governors, so we give that to the head teacher. So it's a case of there's a lot of administrative work, and
sounds like it.
It goes on in the afternoons. And once a week we have staff meetings, staff training sessions, and we also have a senior leadership meeting, which eats into the early hours. So it's a case of just making sure you're organized, that things are done on time.
Like a planner. Having a planner. And in terms of, so you've got this, it sounds like quite a big role to fulfill really, and to fit in, which mashallah you seem to handle it effortlessly, if I can say that. How do you have appraisals in terms of, in your position, do you have appraisals with your, I guess, the above people who are,
Absolutely.
what's that like?
So in our trust, the CEO will appraise the head of the primary, and who in turn will appraise the senior leaders. And myself as an individual, I will appraise the 14 members of staff in my team.
14?
14, 1 4.
14. Okay, mashallah. It's still a lot though, because I mean, that's their whole teaching year.
Thank you. Yes, so
in every term.
Teachers, TAs, and subject specialists. I've got 2 teachers who are Spanish and PE teachers, and it also involves supporting them, just kind of setting their targets, meeting with them at different points in the year to kind of see how they're getting on, seeing what support is needed, and also kind of steering them in the direction of the priorities that are listed in the school improvement plan.
Right.
And then it's a case of halfway through the year, we have the mid-year reviews. So at that point, it's okay. By this point, we would have watched them teach. We would have fed back. We would have given them a grade. We would have given them feedback points to develop. And at that point, they've got 3 targets that they need to be working towards, as do I. So they will have normally 1 target about progress for their class, another would be about the quality of teaching and learning, and the third one will be something a bit more bespoke, which will be probably about a subject they lead. And then they carry on collecting their evidence to justify why they should pass performance management at the end of the year as part of their appraisal. And if they pass, and hopefully, most of them do pass, there's hardly anyone who doesn't pass, in all honesty, because there's opportunities through the year to kind of have those conversations to support them. Then at the end, we put them forward for performance management pay increase.
Excellent. And has it been worth it, reaching to the senior leadership position? And what would you say to people who are aspiring to climb up and become senior leaders in a school environment?
I would say,
what are your takeaways and advice?
I would say, first of all, in terms of was it worth it? Yes, it is, definitely. I think it's only naturally part of your progression as a teacher. If you've worked in a school, you've demonstrated impact, and you've got to middle leadership, as was I. So I was a middle leader for a couple of years, and then it's a case of working hard and really being relied on, being able to be relied on. Then it means when those opportunities come up, or when someone says to you, you are ready, or where you feel ready, then you can always move up to the next level. Absolutely. And then there's qualifications you do along the way. So I did my middle leadership course, I did my senior leadership course, and right now I'm doing my so alhamdulillah, I'm doing my qualification for headship, because that's somewhere that I might want to pursue in the future. I don't have to, but at least it gives me the opportunity to think about it in the next couple of years. And the key, so in terms of the role itself, absolutely, it is tiring, but it's very rewarding when you know that you're actually part of that journey to kind of steer the school in a certain direction, and really just share good practice, and you've developed a relationship with parents in the playground, so it's nice to kind of give back to the community. That's so rewarding for me, and I feel that that's what keeps me getting up in the morning, going to work, because I've been to a school like this when I was a child, and I would have loved to have seen more teachers or senior teachers who wore hijab, or just like where I could see myself in them as well. And in terms of the takeaways, I would say some of the key points is as a professional, reach out if you need help. There's all sorts of people. There are people in your school, there are managers, there's a head, there's a union, there are friends who are in the profession. So there's a wealth of advice and guidance out there. In terms of the key takeaways, I'd say is persist, and one day isn't like the be all and the end all. It's a case of have fun with the job you pursue.
Yes,
Especially
I think
with
that's important.
Oh, absolutely.
Enjoy the journey, as they say.
Absolutely. And it's really nice to develop, those kind of professional kind of relationships with pupils. And as they progress and as they get into secondary, it's nice to see those children do well. And it's nice to follow them up or to know a bit more about their background, so that if there was any questions raised, you can always say, oh, I know a bit about this family and this is what might help them. So it's really rewarding. Key takeaways are, show excellence in what you do, work hard.
Of course. This is amazing. I'm so glad that you've brought up that point, because it just links back to what our religion is about, and you've used the perfect word, excellence.
Excellence. And it's funny because I went to a talk a few years ago, and in it was about, whether as parents or as individuals in society, we should, as being visual, or just having the name as Muslims, we should always demonstrate a positive impact in our community, support our community, be excellent role models in ourselves where possible, and also, be seen to be and do make right choices where possible. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to, fail at something. And it's about just getting up, getting on with it again. And a key takeaway would be, as you go along any career, especially with teaching, develop your skill set, volunteer for clubs, show that initiative, so that by the end of your, so as you progress through the teaching career, and by the time you get to, let's say, end of your profession, you've developed, you've got those skill sets, you've completed the qualifications, whether it's a national professional qualification for senior leadership or anything of the sort, that you've actually done the suitable qualification along the way, which validates your teaching applications when you apply for senior leadership positions, and also reach out and seek advice from people who may have left. It might be former head teachers, or it's worth networking, keeping in contact with colleagues, meeting them up for a coffee, getting to know what works for them, what doesn't. And just because someone's doing really well at a certain school, this isn't necessarily you'll have the same experience, but it means that there's a lot of lessons to be learned.
Yes.
And if you're not sure, ask. But patience is absolutely very important on this journey.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your, perspective and your experience, and as a mother, as a senior leader, and as a teacher. And I'd like to say Jazakallah khair, and thank you for joining us on Resonating Reflections. So you've been listening to me, Fatima Jabbie, on Ramadan Radio, 87.9 FM. And up next at 4 p.m. is the Legal Hour on the criminal justice system. Do stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And yeah, until next time. So any last words, Shahista?
Just want to say Jazakallah khair, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of your the rest of the day. I think you can put your feet up now since you had an early start.
Thank you.
So yeah, what are you having for iftar?